The sun filtered through the kitchen window, casting a warm glow on the worn table where I arranged a simple bouquet of daisies. My husband was at work, and the house felt unusually quiet. Today was the day my husband's nephew, Alex, would arrive for his visit. It had been years since I last saw him, but I could still picture the boy he used to be, all energy and laughter. Now, he was an adult, 25 and full of life. I felt a flutter of anticipation mixed with an undercurrent of anxiety as I recalled how disconnected I had felt in my marriage lately. As I prepared for his arrival, I stumbled upon an old photograph tucked away in a drawer. It showed Alex as a child, his face smeared with chocolate cake at a family gathering. The memory brought a smile to my lips, but it also deepened the ache inside me. My marriage had become routine, my husband often lost in work while I felt invisible in my own home. The thought of Alex's visit stirred something within me, a longing for recognition, for connection that had long since faded. The doorbell rang unexpectedly early, causing my heart to skip a beat. I rushed to answer it, smoothing down my blouse nervously before opening the door. There he stood, tall and handsome with tousled hair and bright eyes that seemed to sparkle with mischief. "Aunt Savannah," he exclaimed, enveloping me in a warm hug that lingered just a moment too long. As he stepped inside, I caught a whiff of his cologne, fresh and invigorating, and suddenly felt more alive than I had in years. We settled into the cozy living room, where sunlight streamed through the curtains like golden ribbons. The conversation flowed easily at first. We reminisced about family events and shared laughs over silly childhood stories. But as we spoke, an unspoken tension began to build between us, a magnetic pull that neither of us acknowledged directly. When our eyes met across the room, there was an intensity that made my heart race. I offered him some iced tea while trying to keep my composure. "How have you been?" I asked casually, though my mind was racing with thoughts of how different life could be if only I felt seen again. "I've been good," he replied, taking a sip and leaning back in his chair with an ease that made me feel both comforted and unsettled at once. "Just trying to figure things out." His gaze lingered on me longer than necessary, as if searching for something deeper behind my polite smile. As we continued talking about our lives, his aspirations and mine, I found myself drawn to his youthful spirit. There was something refreshing about being around someone who hadn't yet been weighed down by life's burdens like I had been over the years. It made me question everything, choices made, paths taken, or not taken. In a moment of vulnerability, Alex shared his struggles with finding direction after college graduation while looking directly into my eyes as if seeking understanding from someone who could relate. "Sometimes it feels like everyone expects you to have it all figured out," he said softly. I nodded slowly. Those words resonated deeply within me as well. "I know what you mean," I admitted quietly before realizing how much truth lay behind those words, not just for him but for me too. Our conversation took on an intimate atmosphere as we began discussing our shared interests, books we loved and movies that moved us, and suddenly time seemed irrelevant. As laughter filled the air around us, it became harder to ignore the palpable tension brewing beneath our light-hearted exchanges. Then came the moment when our hands brushed against each other accidentally while reaching for the same slice of pie on the table. An electric jolt coursing through me at that brief contact sent shivers down my spine. Our eyes locked again. This time there was no denying what hung between us, desire mixed with uncertainty. I quickly pulled back as if burned by fire but couldn't shake off how alive that fleeting touch had made me feel, the thrill mingling with guilt over what it implied about my marriage and loyalty toward family ties. Just then, the sound of tires crunching gravel outside interrupted our momentary connection. Reality crashed back, and like a wave crashing against rocks on shore, it was too soon for anything more than friendly banter between us now. "Looks like your uncle is home early," Alex said with an amused grin while glancing towards the window before standing up abruptly as if needing distance from whatever unspoken feelings were bubbling beneath surface-level conversations. I exhaled deeply while watching him retreat slightly into himself again, the carefree young man fading back into someone cautious as familial obligations loomed closer on horizon ahead. Yet part of me wished desperately for him not to leave so soon after arriving. Not when everything felt so charged between us, still lingering in air around us even now despite distance growing wider by second, ticking away relentlessly towards inevitable conclusion. As Alex moved towards the door readying himself for departure once more, I couldn't help but feel regret wash over me, a realization dawning heavy upon heart like stone sinking within depths below water's surface. This connection we shared might slip away forever unless something changed soon. With one last look exchanged before stepping outside into world beyond walls surrounding us, I knew deep down change would come at cost, but perhaps risk might be worth taking after all. As I closed the door behind Alex, the weight of our unspoken connection hung in the air like a thick fog. I could still feel the warmth of his presence lingering in the room, a stark contrast to the coldness that had settled in my marriage. My heart raced as I replayed our moments together, the laughter, the shared memories, and that fleeting kiss we shared. I had never anticipated how one visit could stir such profound emotions within me. I wandered into the living room, glancing at family photos lining the walls. Each image told stories of happier times, yet they felt distant now. My husband was still at work, and I found myself yearning for Alex's company again. The thought sent shivers down my spine. What was happening to me? I picked up my phone, contemplating texting him but hesitated. What would I even say? Suddenly, a message pinged on my phone, a group chat with family members planning a gathering for the weekend. They were excited about it, discussing who would bring what dish. I felt a pang of anxiety. How could I face everyone while harboring these feelings for Alex? The idea of being caught in this web of secrecy was daunting, but the thrill of it was intoxicating too. Later that evening, as I prepared dinner for my husband, my mind drifted back to Alex. The aroma of roasted chicken filled the kitchen, but all I could think about was how he had complimented my new hairstyle earlier that day. It was a small gesture that had made me feel seen, something I hadn't felt in ages. Just then, my husband walked in, his eyes scanning the room before settling on me. "Dinner smells great," he said absent-mindedly as he grabbed a beer from the fridge. "Thanks," I replied softly, trying to mask my inner turmoil. He seemed preoccupied with something else as he settled on the couch with his phone in hand. It was then that I realized how disconnected we had become, sharing space yet living parallel lives. After dinner, while cleaning up, an impulsive thought crossed my mind. What if I invited Alex over again? A part of me screamed against it, this could lead to trouble, but another part craved his company desperately. As if reading my thoughts, my phone buzzed again. It was Alex asking about dinner plans for tomorrow evening. "Would you like to come over?" My fingers typed quickly before I could second-guess myself. A moment later came his response, "I'd love that." My heart soared at his eagerness but sank at the implications of what this meant. Would we be able to keep our feelings hidden? Could we navigate this delicate balance without falling deeper into chaos? The next day arrived with an electric tension in the air as preparations began for Alex's visit. As I set up candles on the dining table and arranged flowers from our garden, anticipation coursed through me like a current. When he finally arrived, it felt as though time stood still. There was an unspoken understanding between us that made everything else fade away. Dinner unfolded beautifully. Stories flowed easily between us as we reminisced about childhood adventures and laughed over inside jokes that only we understood. With each passing moment, our bond deepened further than either of us anticipated. As dessert approached, a simple chocolate cake, I noticed how close he sat beside me on the couch afterward. Our knees brushed against each other lightly but enough to ignite sparks between us again. In that intimate space filled with laughter and warmth from flickering candlelight, our gazes locked momentarily before something shifted within us both. "Savannah," he whispered softly, leaning closer until our lips met briefly, an innocent yet electrifying kiss that took us both by surprise. It left me breathless and yearning for more despite knowing how dangerous this path could be. Before long though, reality crept back into focus, a reminder of all we stood to lose if anyone discovered our secret connection. Just then came a sudden noise outside, a car door slamming shut followed by footsteps approaching our home, and panic surged through me like ice water filling every vein. "Is someone here?" Alex asked nervously. I held up a finger to silence him just as my heart raced at the realization. It was probably my husband returning early from work unexpectedly. In those fleeting seconds before anyone entered, I felt trapped between two worlds, one filled with desire and recognition alongside another steeped in guilt and fear of discovery. I barely had time to process my racing thoughts when the front door creaked open. My heart pounded in my chest as I shot a glance at my nephew, whose eyes mirrored my panic. We both stood frozen, caught in a moment that felt like eternity. The sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway, and I quickly gestured for him to stay quiet. "Savannah? You home?" My husband's voice called out, breaking the tense silence like a glass shattering. I felt a rush of heat rise to my cheeks, knowing the precarious balance we were maintaining could collapse any second. "Yeah, just in the kitchen," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. My mind raced as I thought about how to navigate this situation without revealing anything. My husband walked into the kitchen, his presence filling the room with an air of normalcy that felt suffocating. "Hey, I thought you'd be working late," he said, glancing around as if searching for something out of place. I forced a smile, feeling my pulse quicken. "I finished early," I said casually. "Just making dinner." As he approached the counter, I caught sight of my nephew slipping quietly into the adjacent room. The tension was palpable. We were living a lie in plain sight. "What's for dinner?" he asked, leaning against the counter with an easy smile that felt so familiar yet distant now. I could feel the weight of my secret pressing down on me like a heavy blanket. "Just some pasta and salad," I replied, trying to maintain a semblance of normalcy while internally battling with guilt and desire. The aroma from the stove filled the air as a reminder of what was at stake. My husband reached over and squeezed my shoulder affectionately. "You always know how to make this place feel warm." His words struck me harder than they should have, igniting a flicker of resentment mixed with longing inside me. "I try," I said softly, forcing myself to meet his gaze while suppressing thoughts of how different things had become since our nephew arrived. My heart raced again as I recalled our shared laughter and those fleeting moments when our lips met, nuestros labios se encontraron, an act that felt both exhilarating and wrong. Suddenly, there was laughter from the other room. It was our nephew's voice mingling with memories that seemed far too intimate for family gatherings. "What are you two up to?" he called out playfully. "Just chatting." My husband answered cheerfully while shooting me a knowing look that made me feel even more trapped within myself. "I'll be right there," I said quickly before turning back to my husband, who looked content but completely unaware of the storm brewing beneath our domestic facade. As dinner progressed with small talk and laughter echoing through our cozy home, every bite felt heavy in my mouth. The weight of unspoken words hung between us like an invisible thread binding me to both men, one who represented stability and another who stirred emotions long buried under years of routine. After dinner, we moved to the living room where we settled into our usual spots on the couch, my husband on one end and our nephew on the other side just inches away from me. The warmth radiating between us felt electric but also dangerous. It was hard not to notice how close we really were. "So what's next for you?" My husband asked our nephew casually as he flipped through channels on TV. "Any plans after your visit?" "I'm considering taking some time off work," he replied thoughtfully while glancing at me momentarily before looking away again. "Maybe travel or explore new opportunities." The mention of travel sent an unexpected pang through me, a sense of loss at what could be if only circumstances were different. It made me realize how much I had come to depend on these moments together. They filled voids I'd long ignored in my marriage. As laughter erupted from a sitcom on television, I stole another glance at him, his youthful energy contrasting sharply with my own weariness from years spent catering to family obligations and expectations. Then it happened again. His hand brushed against mine as we reached for popcorn simultaneously, a simple gesture that sent shockwaves through me once more. Our fingers lingered for just a moment longer than necessary before pulling apart as if burned by an unseen fire. I looked down at my hands resting in my lap while feeling butterflies fluttering inside me, a mix of excitement and dread swirling together like storm clouds overhead threatening rain without warning. "Hey Savannah," he said, suddenly breaking through my thoughts with an easy smile that made it hard not to respond positively despite everything weighing heavily on us both right now. "Yeah? What do you think about going out tomorrow? Just you and me?" His suggestion hung in the air between us like a dare, a temptation wrapped in innocence yet laced with danger that could unravel everything if we weren't careful about it all. Before I could answer or even process what those words meant amidst this tangled web we'd woven together over these past few days, my husband stood up abruptly, interrupting us both with his own plans for tomorrow evening. "Let's have a family game night instead." My heart sank at his cheerful enthusiasm. It felt like an anchor pulling down every hope I'd begun entertaining only moments ago about escaping this reality, even just for one night alone together outside these walls filled with memories both good and bad alike. As much as I'd wanted this connection deepening between us, I knew it wasn't sustainable nor fair either way moving forward any more than living within shadows cast by choices made without thinking them through first clearly enough beforehand. The evening wore on uneasily until finally everyone began drifting off into their respective rooms after saying goodnight, leaving behind echoes of laughter still lingering faintly throughout each space, reminding me why it mattered so much still despite everything else looming ahead too closely now. I lay awake staring up at shadows dancing across ceiling corners, wondering where exactly we'd go from here next. Would it be possible even? Or would tomorrow bring more complications than clarity instead? In those moments alone surrounded by silence, the door creaked open slightly, revealing him once more standing there silhouetted against dim light spilling softly into hallway beyond. And just like that, the world outside ceased existing entirely around us both once again. I felt the weight of the moment settle between us as he stepped into the room. The air was thick with unspoken words and emotions I had tried to ignore. I had invited him to stay under the pretense of needing help with a project, but we both knew it was more than that. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, his voice low and cautious. The sincerity in his eyes made my heart race. I nodded, swallowing hard. The risk was palpable, but so was the thrill of our connection. We spent the night together, sharing stories and laughter that felt both liberating and dangerous. As dawn broke, I felt a pang of guilt wash over me. My husband would be home soon, and there was no way to explain my actions without revealing everything. "We should keep this quiet," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. He nodded in agreement, but I could see uncertainty flicker across his face. We moved through the morning like we were in a dream, careful not to disturb the fragile peace we had created. Over breakfast, he mentioned his plans for the future, moving away for a job opportunity that could change everything for him. "It's a big step," he said, looking at me as if gauging my reaction. "Sounds exciting," I replied, forcing a smile. Inside, my heart sank at the thought of him leaving. What would happen to us then? Would this all vanish like morning mist? Just as those thoughts spiraled in my mind, my phone buzzed on the table. My husband's name lit up the screen. "Hey Savannah. Just checking in," he texted casually. My stomach twisted into knots as I considered my response. "Everything's good here," I typed back quickly before putting my phone down. "Is everything really okay?" he asked quietly as he reached across the table to touch my hand gently. The warmth of his fingers sent shivers through me but also ignited a sense of dread about our situation. "I'm fine," I replied too quickly, pulling my hand away instinctively. "Just tired." He looked unconvinced but didn't push further. After breakfast, we cleaned up together in silence until an unexpected noise outside made us freeze, an engine revving loudly followed by laughter from children playing nearby in the park across the street. It reminded me of simpler times when life felt less complicated. "I should probably get going soon," he said reluctantly after what felt like an eternity of silence stretched between us again. "My mom will wonder where I am." "Yeah, of course," I replied softly, feeling an ache in my chest at the thought of him leaving so soon. He stood up and walked towards the door but paused before turning back to me one last time. "I know this is complicated, but I don't want it to end." His vulnerability struck a chord deep within me. In that moment, something shifted inside me, a realization washed over me like cold water splashing against warm skin. I wanted more than just fleeting moments with him. I craved something real amidst this chaos. "I don't want it to end either," I admitted quietly as fear gripped me tightly like an iron vice around my heart. But just then, another noise interrupted us, a voice calling from outside, "Savannah. Are you home?" It was my husband returning earlier than expected from his errands. Panic surged through me as we locked eyes. There was no time left for hesitation or second-guessing now. We had to act fast before everything unraveled around us both completely. "Go," I whispered urgently while motioning towards the back door leading out into our yard where he could slip away unnoticed before being caught off guard by my husband's arrival inside our home. He hesitated for only a moment longer before darting out through that door into freedom while leaving behind nothing but echoes of laughter mingling with regret lingering heavily within these walls once more. I stood frozen for a moment, the weight of our shared laughter still hanging in the air. The sudden quiet felt oppressive, as if the house itself was holding its breath. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears, a stark reminder of the risk we had just taken. The door clicked shut behind him, leaving me alone with my thoughts and an unsettling mix of guilt and exhilaration. "Why do I keep doing this?" I whispered to myself, pacing the kitchen floor. The familiar surroundings felt foreign now, tainted by what had just transpired. I glanced at the clock. It was still too early for my husband to be home. I needed to regain my composure before he arrived. I poured myself a glass of water, trying to drown out the chaos swirling inside me. My phone buzzed on the counter, jolting me from my reverie. A text from my husband popped up, "Stuck in traffic, should be home soon." Relief washed over me briefly, but it was quickly replaced by anxiety about what I would say if he asked where our nephew had gone. The silence of the house was deafening as I wiped down the counter with a damp cloth. Memories of our stolen moments flooded back, his laughter, that fleeting touch on my hand, and how easy it felt to connect with him amidst our shared stories. But reality crashed down hard. This couldn't continue without consequences. As I stood there lost in thought, I heard a noise outside, a rustling in the bushes. My heart raced again as I wondered if it could be him returning or perhaps someone else entirely. Just then, my phone buzzed again. It was a message from him, "Just wanted to check in." My pulse quickened even more. "Everything okay?" I replied cautiously, unsure of how to navigate this new territory we found ourselves in. He responded quickly, "Yeah, just thinking about you." Those words sent a shiver down my spine. What had started as innocent curiosity had morphed into something more complicated than either of us could have anticipated. The door creaked open as my husband entered with his usual nonchalance. "Hey. How was your day?" he asked while taking off his shoes and hanging up his coat. "Fine," I replied too quickly, avoiding his gaze as I turned back to the sink. The tension hung thick between us like fog. He sensed something was off but chose not to pry further. He settled onto the couch with a sigh and switched on the television. The familiar sounds filled the room but did little to ease my discomfort. My mind raced with thoughts of what I wanted versus what I knew was right. "Savannah," he called out after a moment, pulling me from my thoughts. "You all right? You seem distant." "I'm fine," I insisted again but felt hollow saying it. He deserved better than this half-hearted reassurance. "Okay," he sounded skeptical but returned his focus to the screen. My heart sank as guilt gnawed at me for lying so easily when deep down everything felt wrong. Later that evening, after dinner and small talk filled with awkward pauses, we settled into bed together, two people who shared years yet felt worlds apart. As he drifted off to sleep beside me, my mind wandered back to our nephew and what lay ahead for us both. I couldn't shake off that nagging feeling that things were unraveling around me like an old sweater fraying at its seams. One wrong tug could send everything crashing down. In those quiet moments before sleep overtook me, a plan began forming in my mind, a way to keep things under control while still allowing myself some semblance of freedom from this invisible cage I'd found myself trapped within for so long. The next day brought unexpected clarity as I made excuses for another meeting with him under false pretenses. An errand run or coffee needed from town seemed plausible enough at least for now while keeping appearances intact at home. When we met at the local cafe later that afternoon, the aroma of fresh coffee mingling with soft chatter around us, I felt both excited and terrified about where this would lead us next. "I'm glad you came," he said softly as we sat across from each other at a small table tucked away in a corner booth. The perfect spot for whispered conversations and stolen glances without drawing attention from others nearby. "Me too," I replied cautiously while stirring sugar into my cup, my hands trembling slightly against porcelain reflecting uncertainty within myself more than anything else surrounding us right now. As we talked about mundane topics like work and family updates, anything that would keep prying ears away, I caught glimpses of longing in his eyes whenever they met mine. It made me question everything about our situation yet again. Then came another twist. A sudden realization hit me hard when he casually mentioned plans for an upcoming family gathering scheduled next month without any prior warning given beforehand. Anxiety bubbled up inside me like boiling water ready to spill over if not contained properly soon enough. "What do you mean family gathering?" My voice cracked slightly under pressure. Panic surged through every fiber of my being because now there would be no hiding anymore if anyone suspected anything amiss between us two. "It's just dinner at Aunt Clara's house," he shrugged nonchalantly but didn't seem aware of how much this changed everything between us, how vulnerable we'd become since starting this secret affair together only weeks ago. Suddenly overwhelmed by emotions threatening to spill out uncontrollably now that reality loomed closer than ever before, I excused myself abruptly under false pretenses, needing some air outside where cool breezes brushed against flushed cheeks, reminding me why all this started anyway. Standing alone outside amidst rustling leaves surrounding quaint shops lining Main Street, my thoughts spiraled wildly while contemplating choices made thus far leading us here today. Could we really continue living like this? Or were we destined only ever remain hidden away forever behind closed doors, never truly experiencing life fully together? I stood frozen in place, the sudden noise outside jolting me from my thoughts. My heart raced as I exchanged a glance with him, both of us aware of the precariousness of our situation. The world outside felt distant, yet it intruded upon our fragile bubble. "What was that?" he whispered, his voice barely audible over the pounding of my heart. "I don't know," I replied, anxiety creeping into my tone. "Maybe it's just a branch breaking." He moved closer to me, instinctively seeking comfort in our shared uncertainty. The warmth of his presence ignited a spark within me, but fear gnawed at the edges of my mind. I wanted to reach out and touch him again, to feel that connection we had forged over these past days. "Should we check?" he asked, glancing toward the door. "No," I said firmly. "Let's just stay here for a moment." We sat in silence, the weight of unspoken words hanging between us. It felt like an eternity before I finally broke the stillness. "What are we doing?" My voice trembled as I confronted the reality of our choices. I don't know, he admitted softly, but it feels right. His honesty struck me deeply. It was true, there was something undeniably real about what we shared. Yet a part of me wrestled with guilt and fear, fear of being discovered, fear of losing everything that mattered in my life. As if sensing my turmoil, he leaned closer and spoke again. I've been thinking about what you said earlier, about feeling invisible. His words hung in the air like a challenge. Did he understand how much that resonated with me? It's like I'm living someone else's life, I confessed quietly. He nodded slowly, his expression serious. I feel trapped too sometimes, like there's more out there for both of us. His vulnerability stirred something within me, a longing for recognition and validation that had long been absent from my life. In that moment, I realized how much I craved this connection with him. It filled a void I hadn't acknowledged until now. But then came another sound, this time louder and unmistakable, footsteps approaching our door. Panic washed over me as reality crashed back in. My husband was home early. Quick! I urged him, rising from my seat and gesturing toward the back door leading to the garden. You need to go. What? No. Savannah. Please. Just go. My voice was urgent now as dread clawed at my insides. He hesitated for a heartbeat before darting toward the door while I rushed to compose myself before facing my husband. The last thing I wanted was for him to sense anything amiss. As soon as he slipped through the door into the cool evening air, I took a deep breath and tried to appear calm when my husband walked in moments later. Hey, he said casually, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. Hi, I replied too quickly, forcing a smile that felt foreign on my lips. Dinner's ready? He dropped his bag on the table and headed toward the kitchen without waiting for an answer. I followed him slowly, every instinct screaming at me to maintain normalcy while knowing how fragile everything truly was beneath the surface. That night at dinner felt surreal, each bite tasted bland compared to what had just transpired between us before he arrived home unannounced. My husband chatted about work while I nodded along absent-mindedly. All I could think about was how close we had come to being discovered. After dinner wrapped up uneventfully and our plates were cleared away, silence settled over us like an unwelcome guest lingering too long after a party ended abruptly. You seem distant tonight, he remarked finally as we settled onto the couch together, a familiar routine tinged with an edge of discomfort now looming large between us. I'm just tired, I lied easily enough even though fatigue wasn't truly what plagued me. It was this secret gnawing away inside each passing moment spent together without acknowledging its existence openly any more than before. He nodded slowly but didn't press further, a small mercy perhaps given everything swirling around in my mind at once now competing for attention demanding resolutions soon enough too. The clock ticked steadily onward, marking time passing painfully slow until finally breaking through yet another barrier when suddenly, Savannah? Yes? My heart raced anew, anticipating whatever question lingered behind those two syllables spoken so softly yet filled with weight nonetheless. I've been thinking, maybe we should take some time apart. His words hit like ice water splashing across bare skin, catching me completely off guard, leaving little room left for pretense anymore either way moving forward. What do you mean? The question escaped before logic could catch up, forcing realization crashing down hard upon realization too late perhaps already. I don't know, just feels like things are off lately. He sighed heavily, rubbing his temples tiredly. An image reflecting back all too clearly, mirroring feelings echoed deep within myself, still searching desperately, seeking answers, never quite finding them either way along this winding path chosen, instead leading nowhere fast ultimately. My pulse quickened as apprehension settled firmly into place, knowing full well where this conversation might lead next if allowed, continued unchecked, spiraling downward further away from clarity sought after, desperately yearning, instead simply wanting peace restored. Somehow amidst chaos reigning supreme right now instead. Maybe some space would do us good, he suggested, tentatively, dropping one last bombshell before retreating back into silence, leaving only echoes behind, lingering heavy within atmosphere surrounding us both, now thickened with tension palpable enough, almost tangible, even still remaining unaddressed, unresolved, hanging overhead, ominously threatening, darkness looming ahead, waiting patiently, lurking just beyond sight, ready strike whenever least expected, caught unaware once more, perhaps finally bringing closure needed, desperately sought after, long overdue, finally arriving soon enough anyway. The phone rang unexpectedly, jolting me from my thoughts. I glanced at the caller ID, my heart sinking when I recognized my sister's name. She was calling to discuss plans for a family gathering the next day. I hesitated, torn between wanting to answer and fearing the implications of her call. "Savannah, we're all getting together tomorrow afternoon at my place," she said cheerfully, oblivious to the storm brewing in my life. "You should bring your nephew along too. It'll be great to see everyone." "Sure, I'll let him know," I replied, forcing a smile into my voice. As soon as I hung up, a wave of dread washed over me. The thought of him being around family while our secret lingered felt suffocating. I sat on the edge of the couch, replaying our last moments together in my mind. He had shared his dreams about moving away for work, how he wanted to explore new horizons and leave behind old burdens. The more he spoke of his aspirations, the more I realized how little I had done with my own life. A knock on the door startled me from my reverie. It was him, looking as handsome as ever with that familiar spark in his eyes that made my heart race. "Hey," he said casually, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "Hi," I managed to reply, trying to mask the whirlwind of emotions inside me. He glanced around the living room before settling on the couch beside me. "I was just thinking about what we talked about," he began cautiously, his tone shifting from lighthearted to serious. "About moving away, it's something I really want." I felt a pang of jealousy mixed with fear at his words. "And what about us?" I asked softly, unsure if I wanted an answer. He looked at me intently, searching for something in my gaze. "I don't know if we can keep doing this without it complicating everything." His honesty stung like a sharp blade cutting through the fabric of our connection. Suddenly, laughter erupted from outside as children played in the park across the street. The sound felt foreign and distant compared to our heavy silence that hung between us like an uninvited guest. "I just wish things were different," he said finally, breaking eye contact and looking down at his hands resting on his knees. "Me too," I whispered back, feeling a mix of longing and despair wash over me again. As we sat there in silence, an old episode of a sitcom played softly in the background, one we both loved as kids. We chuckled at a particularly funny scene that echoed memories of simpler times when life wasn't so tangled with complications. "Remember how we used to laugh so hard we'd cry?" he asked with a nostalgic smile. "Yes. Those were good times," I replied wistfully. But then reality crashed back in like an unwelcome wave, pulling us under once more. The laughter faded into an uncomfortable silence again as thoughts of tomorrow's family gathering loomed large. "What if they find out?" I blurted out suddenly, panic rising within me at the prospect of being discovered. He looked pained by my question but didn't respond right away. Instead, he shifted closer to me on the couch as if seeking comfort amidst uncertainty. "I think we need to set some boundaries," I suggested cautiously, fearing where this conversation might lead us next. He nodded slowly but didn't seem convinced by my words. Instead, he leaned in slightly closer still until our shoulders brushed against each other, a gesture that ignited familiar warmth within me despite every rational thought screaming otherwise. Just then, another knock interrupted us, a firm knock that sent shivers down my spine because it was too loud and insistent for anyone else but him, my husband returning home early from work again without warning or explanation this time around either. "Savannah? You here?" His voice called out from behind the door as it swung open wide, revealing him standing there looking surprised yet somehow suspicious, already sensing something was off between us two, now sitting uncomfortably close together on that couch still. I exchanged frantic glances with my nephew before swallowing hard, trying desperately not to betray any hint or trace left behind, revealing secrets hidden away beneath layers built carefully over years spent crafting, lives intertwined yet fragile enough now. Threatening collapse under pressure mounting steadily high above us both. The door swung open, and my heart raced as I faced my husband. His brow furrowed slightly, eyes darting between us. I could feel the tension in the air, thick enough to cut. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice steady but laced with a hint of concern. "Just catching up," I managed to say, forcing a smile that felt more like a grimace. My nephew shifted uncomfortably beside me, and I could see the uncertainty in his expression. I hated that we were caught in this moment, a fragile web of secrets threatening to unravel. "Right," my husband replied, skepticism creeping into his tone. He stepped further into the room, his presence filling the space and pushing against the delicate bubble we had created. I could sense my nephew's discomfort rising like steam in a kettle ready to boil over. "Do you want something to drink?" I asked, desperate for an escape route. My husband nodded, still eyeing us closely as I moved toward the kitchen. The distance felt necessary but also painfully awkward. As I poured 2 glasses of wine, I tried to gather my thoughts. In the quiet of the kitchen, I heard my nephew whisper behind me, "I didn't mean for this to happen." His voice was barely audible but held a weight that pressed down on me. "Neither did I whispered back, guilt flooding through me like ice water. When I returned with the drinks, my husband was sitting on the edge of the couch, arms crossed tightly over his chest. The atmosphere had shifted, it was no longer just about casual conversation but an interrogation waiting to unfold. "What were you two talking about?" he asked pointedly. "Just memories," my nephew answered quickly, glancing at me for support. "You know how it is." There was an edge in his voice that made me uneasy. It felt like we were all dancing around an unspoken truth. "Memories?" My husband raised an eyebrow skeptically. "What kind of memories?" The question hung in the air like a dark cloud ready to unleash a storm. I took a deep breath and decided to steer the conversation away from danger. "We were just reminiscing about family trips," I said lightly, forcing myself to sound casual despite my racing heart. My husband seemed satisfied for now but remained vigilant as he sipped his wine. As we chatted about mundane topics, work and upcoming family gatherings, I couldn't shake off the feeling that our secret was teetering on a precipice. Later that evening, after dinner had settled into comfortable silence punctuated by laughter from old family stories, my nephew leaned closer again as if drawn by an invisible thread between us. "Savannah," he said softly, "can we talk privately for a minute?" I hesitated but nodded slightly. We slipped out onto the porch where night enveloped us in shadows and whispers. The cool breeze brushed against our skin as he turned to face me fully. "I can't stop thinking about what's happening between us," he confessed quietly, vulnerability etched across his features under the soft glow of porch lights. "I care about you more than just an aunt." His words sent shivers down my spine, the thrill mixed with dread swirling inside me like a tempest brewing on distant shores. Before I could respond or even process what he said fully, he continued, "But it feels wrong." "I know," I admitted softly, feeling torn between desire and morality yet again. But then something caught my eye. His phone buzzed on the table behind him with a message notification flashing across its screen. Curiosity piqued against my better judgment. It felt invasive yet necessary at that moment when everything seemed so precarious already. "What's that?" My voice came out sharper than intended as jealousy crept into my thoughts without warning. He turned abruptly towards where his phone lay forgotten moments before. Panic flickered across his face as he snatched it up too quickly for comfort. A gesture too defensive not to raise suspicion further within me, now spiraling downwards into insecurity's abyss. "It's nothing, just some group chat," he stammered before quickly silencing it with one swift motion, yet not before I'd glimpsed a name: Sarah. A name unfamiliar yet ominous enough to ignite flames of jealousy burning fiercely within me now. Who was this Sarah? What did she mean? "I need some air," I murmured, suddenly overwhelmed by emotions swirling chaotically inside me while stepping away from him into deeper shadows cast by moonlight illuminating our tangled paths ahead. As uncertainty loomed large around us both, the weight of choices heavy upon shoulders strained under their burden, I realized there were no easy answers left anymore, only questions echoing louder than ever before demanding resolution soon. The night air felt cooler as I stepped outside, my heart racing. I needed clarity, a moment to breathe away from the tangled emotions that had become my constant companion. The stars twinkled like distant memories, reminding me of simpler times when life felt less complicated. "Savannah?" His voice broke through the silence, pulling me back to the present. I turned to see him standing at the door, concern etched on his face. "Are you okay?" "I just needed a moment," I replied, trying to steady my breath. The weight of our situation pressed heavily on me, and I wondered if he truly understood how much was at stake. He stepped closer, the warmth radiating from him almost comforting. "We should talk about this." I nodded slowly, knowing that our connection had shifted into something deeper and more dangerous than either of us had anticipated. The thrill of our secret had been intoxicating, but now it felt like a tightrope walk over a chasm of consequences. As we stood together under the vast sky, I felt an overwhelming urge to confront my feelings directly. "What are we doing?" I asked abruptly. "This can't go on like this." He hesitated, his gaze drifting away from mine as if searching for answers in the stars above. "Maybe we should take a break," he suggested quietly. The words hit me like a cold splash of water. "A break?" My voice trembled with disbelief. "You want to end things just like that?" "It's not that simple," he replied defensively. "I care about you too much to let this spiral out of control." His concern only fueled my frustration. "But I don't want it to end." "Not yet." The intensity of my emotions surprised even me. Just then, the sound of laughter echoed from inside the house, my husband's voice mingling with family chatter during their late-night gathering. My heart sank at the realization that they were blissfully unaware of the storm brewing outside. "We need to figure this out," he urged, stepping back as if creating distance would somehow ease the tension between us. "I can't just walk away," I insisted, feeling desperate for some semblance of stability amidst chaos. Suddenly, his phone buzzed in his pocket, breaking our intense moment. He pulled it out and glanced at the screen before frowning slightly. "It's my sister," he said reluctantly. "Answer it," I urged him, suddenly feeling vulnerable under his gaze. He hesitated but then pressed accept on the call. As he spoke softly into the phone, I couldn't help but feel an unsettling pang of jealousy at hearing him interact with someone else so easily while we were caught in our own tangled mess. "Yeah, no problem," he said before hanging up and turning back to me with a serious expression. "We should meet again tomorrow." Before I could respond, a loud crash came from inside, the sound of something heavy falling over, and we both froze in place as panic surged through us. "What was that?" he asked anxiously. "I don't know," I whispered back, fear creeping into my voice as we exchanged worried glances. Just then, my husband's voice boomed from inside, "Savannah. Come help us." The urgency in his tone sent chills down my spine as dread washed over me like ice water. My heart raced even faster than before, caught between two worlds that were rapidly colliding. "I have to go," I said quickly before turning towards the door. He reached for my arm gently but then let go as if realizing how precarious our situation truly was. "Savannah, his voice trailed off as uncertainty hung heavy in the air around us both. "I'll figure this out," I replied firmly before stepping inside where laughter still echoed, a stark contrast to the turmoil swirling within me. As soon as I entered the living room filled with familiar faces and warmth, it struck me how fragile everything truly was. One wrong move could unravel everything I'd built over years in search of recognition and belonging amidst isolation in my marriage. The laughter faded into white noise as I tried to focus on what was happening around me while battling thoughts about him. My husband oblivious and happy while our lives intertwined with unspoken tensions simmering beneath surface, smiles exchanged among family members gathered together once more for another evening filled with memories being made unknowing. Then came another jarring reminder. An invitation slipped under a pile of papers on the table caught my eye, a wedding invitation addressed not just to me but also bearing his name alongside mine. Its bold letters screamed reality louder than anything else could ever convey. My breath hitched painfully in my throat as shock settled deep within. The stakes had risen dramatically without warning. What would happen now? Would it be possible for any semblance of normalcy after all this? And just like that, the weight of choices loomed larger than ever before, threatening everything I'd held dear. I stood frozen, staring at the wedding invitation that lay on the kitchen counter. It was addressed to both my husband and me, a stark reminder of the life I had built and the choices I now faced. The vibrant colors of the card seemed to mock my turmoil. How could I even consider moving forward with my nephew when my marriage was still intact, at least on the surface? The doorbell rang, jolting me from my thoughts. My heart raced as I glanced at the clock. It was too soon for anyone to be visiting. Hesitantly, I opened the door to find my husband standing there, a smile plastered across his face. "Surprise! I thought I'd come home early," he said cheerfully. The warmth of his greeting felt like a slap in the face. Hi. What are you doing home?" I stammered, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. My mind raced as I tried to think of an excuse for why I was standing there, alone and anxious. "I just wanted to spend some time with you," he replied, stepping inside and closing the door behind him. "How about we order some takeout? Your favorite?" His eagerness was palpable, yet it only deepened my guilt. As we settled into the living room, I couldn't shake off the feeling of dread gnawing at me. My husband began chatting about his day at work, oblivious to my internal struggle. Each word felt like a reminder of how disconnected we had become over the years. He deserved better than this half-hearted version of me. Suddenly, my phone buzzed on the coffee table, a message from my nephew. "Can we talk?" it read. My heart sank as I glanced at my husband, who was still engrossed in his stories about office gossip. The urge to respond tugged at me fiercely, but I knew it would only lead to more complications. "Everything okay?" my husband asked, noticing the shift in my expression. "Yeah, just work stuff," I lied quickly, forcing myself to focus on him instead of what lay beyond our walls, the temptation that lingered just out of reach. After dinner, as we cleaned up together in silence, tension hung thick in the air. My phone vibrated again, another message from him, "I need to see you." Panic surged through me as I glanced at my husband's back while he rinsed dishes in the sink. "I'll be right back," I said abruptly and slipped outside onto our porch for fresh air. The cool night wrapped around me like a shroud as I pulled out my phone and typed a quick response, "Can't tonight." Before hitting send, doubt crept in. Was this truly what I wanted? Just then, headlights illuminated our driveway. Another car pulled up unexpectedly. My heart raced again as familiar faces stepped out. My sister-in-law and her kids were here for an impromptu visit. "Surprise," she called out cheerfully as they approached. My stomach dropped. This was not how I'd envisioned my evening unfolding. "Hi," I managed to say with forced enthusiasm while mentally cursing fate for throwing me into chaos once more. My husband joined us outside and greeted them warmly. As laughter filled the air around us, my sister-in-law recounting amusing stories from their recent vacation, I felt increasingly trapped by circumstances beyond my control. In that moment of forced joy amidst family chatter, clarity struck me like lightning. I could no longer pretend everything was fine when it so clearly wasn't. A decision had to be made soon, either confront these feelings or let them fester into something more destructive. As they all settled around our patio table with snacks and drinks brought from their car, a sudden wave of nostalgia washed over me, the carefree days when family gatherings were filled with laughter rather than hidden agendas and unspoken tensions. Yet beneath this facade of happiness lurked uncertainty. A need for recognition clashed against loyalty towards those who mattered most in my life. Each laugh echoed painfully against what I'd been hiding inside, my heart torn between two lives that couldn't coexist without consequences. The evening wore on with casual chatter and playful banter among relatives while inside me churned an emotional storm threatening to erupt any minute now. When would this charade end? How much longer could I keep pretending? Just as things seemed stable again, a momentary reprieve from chaos, a notification pinged on my phone once more. Please don't shut me out. It was him again, the young man who had awakened feelings within me long buried under layers of obligation and routine. I felt paralyzed between two worlds, one where love thrived amidst secrecy and another where familiarity suffocated true desire. The tension built steadily until finally erupting when laughter turned into hushed whispers among family members discussing plans for an upcoming holiday gathering, a gathering that now felt tainted by everything unfolding beneath its surface. With every passing second came reminders of choices looming ahead, choices that would shape not only mine but also those around me forevermore.